the moment a senator called her sweetheart, and instantly regretted it. Picture this. A packed Senate committee room, cameras rolling, microphones live, and in less than 3 minutes, a 69-year-old career politician's condescending smile transforms into a national embarrassment that breaks the internet. What you're about to witness is the moment Lindsey Graham made the fatal mistake of calling Jasmine Crockett sweetheart on live television, and learned exactly why that was the worst decision of his political career. The setup, David versus Goliath. The date was supposed to be routine. A Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on voting rights. The kind of predictable political theater that usually puts America to sleep. Republicans defending states' rights. Democrats warning about voter suppression. Nothing changes. Everyone goes home. But sitting in that committee room were two people who represented completely different Americas. On one side, Lindsey Graham, 69 years old, over 2 decades in Congress, the embodiment of everything people hate about career politicians. This was a man who perfected the art of saying nothing while sounding important. He called Trump a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot in 2016, then became his most loyal defender the moment Trump won. Graham's specialty? Making young progressives look naive while positioning himself as a wise elder who understood how Washington really works. On the other side, Jasmine Crockett, 43 years old, freshman congresswoman, former civil rights attorney who'd spent 12 years fighting the exact voter suppression cases they were discussing. She represented workers cheated by employers, families discriminated against by banks, communities systematically excluded from power. But most importantly, she'd already proven multiple times that she wouldn't be intimidated by anyone, regardless of their seniority or political connections. The issue bringing them together? Voting rights legislation. For Graham, an opportunity to perform for the cameras. For Crockett, a fight for her constituents' fundamental democratic rights. The calm before the storm. For the first hour, everything went exactly as expected. Republican senators asked softball questions to conservative witnesses. Democrats pressed for stronger protections. Crockett sat patiently, taking notes, waiting for a turn with a folder of documented cases. Voters disenfranchised by new laws, polling place closures in minority communities, detailed analysis of how recent changes affected turnout in her district. Graham was in his element, asking probing questions that made him sound serious while never actually committing anything. Southern accent, folksy demeanor, performing for the cameras like he'd done for decades. When Crockett's turn finally came, she delivered a methodical, devastating presentation. Specific examples, well-documented cases, detailed policy recommendations, professional, authoritative delivery that showcased 12 years of constitutional law expertise. But as she spoke, Graham's body language changed. Phone checking, whispered comments to staff, the expression of someone enduring a boring lecture from a naive child who didn't understand political reality. The fatal mistake. When Crockett finished, Graham leaned into his microphone with that confident smile, the same one he'd used to dismiss countless opponents over the years. "Well, that was very interesting, Congresswoman Crockett," he began, voice dripping with condescension. "I appreciate your passion for these issues. Really, I do. It's refreshing to see young people who care so much about civic participation." The room got quieter. Other committee members looked up from their phones. This wasn't routine questioning. This was a teaching moment where the experienced senator would show the freshman representative how politics actually worked. "But I have to ask," Graham continued, leaning back with visible amusement, "do you really think everything you described is as simple as you're making it sound? Because those of us who've been doing this for a while understand that election law is incredibly complex, and there are always two sides to every story." Classic Graham. Dismiss the substance, suggest inexperience, position himself as the mature voice of wisdom. Crockett's response was measured. "Senator Graham, I appreciate your concern about complexity, but the examples I've shared aren't theoretical. These are documented cases of voters in my district who've been disenfranchised by laws that serve no legitimate purpose except to reduce turnout." "Oh, I'm sure you believe that," Graham replied, smile widening. "But, sweetheart, the Constitution gives states the right to manage their own elections. That's not voter suppression. That's federalism. Maybe when you've been here a little longer, you'll understand how our system actually works. Sweetheart. The word hung in the air like a slap. The entire room tensed. In 2024, a senior senator had just called a sitting Congresswoman sweetheart on live television while dismissing her constitutional expertise. The trap is set. Crockett's eyes flashed dangerously, but her voice remained deadly calm. The controlled fury of a prosecutor about to destroy a lying witness. Senator, I'm not your sweetheart. I'm a congresswoman who was elected to represent 760,000 constituents, and I'd appreciate being addressed with the same respect you show your male colleagues. Graham waved dismissively, apparently oblivious to the hole he was digging. Of course. I didn't mean any disrespect. It's just that when you've been in the Senate as long as I have, you learn to see the bigger picture. He was doubling down instead of backing off, believing his seniority and Southern charm would protect him. She turned slightly, finding Jasmine in the crowd. She didn't get loud because she was emotional. She got loud because she cared. And if that bothers someone, maybe they should ask themselves why passion bothers them more than indifference. Then came the moment that would echo across America. I'm not here to scold or shame. I'm too old for that. I'm here because somebody tried to find me without ever meeting me. And I just figured I'd introduce myself. Evelyn stepped back on the mic, folded her hands, and walked to her seat. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the applause began, not polite political clapping, but real applause, the kind you feel in your chest. Caroline barely clapped. She knew she had lost the room, and much more. The aftermath. The video went viral within minutes. Not with drama or outrage, but with something deeper. Respect, admiration, recognition. Within hours, hashtag Mama Crockett was trending. News outlets called it a masterclass in dignity. The clip was shared over 22 million times, not for entertainment, but as wisdom. Teachers played it in classrooms. College professors analyzed her phrasing. A nonprofit in Dallas booked her for a youth leadership summit. Caroline tried to move on, but every interview, every appearance, someone brought up Evelyn. The dignity, the poise, the unexpected power of restraint. Behind closed doors, Caroline's team scrambled. If we try to rehab your image, one aide told her, you'll look like you're trying to keep up with Evelyn. But if we ignore it, you'll look like you still don't get it. Caroline snapped. I made one comment. Right, the aide said, and she made one speech. Guess which one stuck? The lasting impact. Evelyn never changed a thing. She went back to Dallas, resumed her retirement routine, declined every interview request. I've said my piece, she told reporters. Let's make room for the next voice. But her words kept echoing. Young women quoted her speeches. Mothers shared her videos. A teacher in Oklahoma played Evelyn's remarks at a faculty meeting and asked colleagues to write down what dignity meant to them. The most powerful moment came weeks later at a small Ethiopian restaurant in D.C., where Jasmine and her mother sat across from each other, no cameras, no crowds. I've been thinking about something, Jasmine said. When you got up on that stage, I didn't realize how heavy I'd been carrying it. All of it. Every insult, every headline. Every time someone tried to shrink me into a stereotype. Evelyn waited, listening. And then you spoke. And suddenly, I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. That wasn't for them, Evelyn said quietly. That was for you. Because I knew if I didn't say something, you'd carry that moment around forever. And it didn't belong to you. The real victory. Caroline's insult was meant to diminish. Instead, it illuminated something beautiful. The quiet strength of a mother who didn't need to yell to be heard, who didn't need revenge, only resolve. Evelyn never chased the spotlight. She didn't write a book, start a podcast, or launch a foundation. She spoke her truth, sat down and let it land. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that grace doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It stands firm and it stays. In a world spinning fast on noise, one mother's choice to speak without rage reminded us of something we often forget. Real leadership doesn't need a microphone echo. It just needs truth, delivered with dignity, from a heart that knows its worth. Sometimes the most powerful response to an insult isn't a comeback. It's an introduction. And sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. But Crockett saved her most devastating attack for last. You want to know what I've learned about how Washington really works? Senator Graham? Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but remained audible throughout the room. I've learned that too many people in this city think longevity equals competence. That being here a long time matters more than being right. That calling someone sweetheart is an acceptable substitute for engaging with their arguments. She looked directly at him with moral authority that filled the room. I've learned that some senators think they can dismiss a black woman with patronizing nicknames and condescending lectures instead of actually addressing voter suppression in their own states. And I've learned that when those senators get called out, they hide behind fake politeness instead of taking responsibility for their actions. The room erupted in applause. Democratic committee members were on their feet. Even some Republican staffers were nodding approvingly. Graham sat in stunned silence, face flushed with embarrassment and anger. For perhaps the first time in his decades-long career, he was genuinely speechless. So no, Senator Graham, I won't be taking advice about how Washington works from someone who spent 40 years perfecting the art of saying nothing while standing for even less. And I certainly won't be lectured about constitutional law by someone who thinks sweetheart is an appropriate way to address a colleague. The aftermath, going viral. Within 20 minutes, hashtag Lindsey Graham sweetheart was trending nationally. The complete exchange spread across social media faster than any congressional hearing content in political history. The response transcended partisan lines as Americans united in disgust at Graham's behavior. Lindsey Graham really called her sweetheart, then got absolutely destroyed, tweeted one user, garnering over 300,000 retweets. Even conservative commentators struggled to defend Graham's behavior. Major news networks led with the story. CNN, Senators' condescending comments backfire spectacularly. MSNBC booked Crockett for prime-time interviews. Even Fox News couldn't ignore the story. Graham's damage control made things worse. His Twitter attempts at explanation only generated more mockery and shares of the confrontation clips. His staff eventually convinced him to stop posting entirely. The lasting impact. The confrontation shifted national conversations about women in politics, generational change, and the difference between experience and competence. Crockett had proven that longevity in office didn't automatically translate to expertise. For Graham, the impact was immediate and lasting. Speaking requests dried up. Republican donors questioned his effectiveness. His approval ratings dropped significantly, particularly among women voters. Most damaging was how the incident exposed his essential weakness, relying on institutional authority rather than actual knowledge. For Crockett, the viral moment accelerated her emergence as a national political figure. But she used the attention strategically, steering conversations back to substantive policy issues rather than just celebrating her triumph. This was never about me versus Senator Graham, she told Rachel Maddow. This was about whether we're going to accept a political culture where women, particularly women of color, can be dismissed and disrespected instead of having their ideas engaged seriously. The lesson: 6 months later, political science professors analyzed the most significant moments of congressional discourse that year. The Graham-Crockett confrontation topped every list. Students studied it as an example of how preparation and moral authority could overcome institutional power. The viral moment changed expectations for political discourse in America. The old model of accepting condescending treatment in the name of civility was increasingly seen as enabling bad behavior rather than maintaining professional standards. 2 years later, when Jasmine Crockett announced she was considering a run for Senate, the first clip in her announcement video was Lindsey Graham calling her sweetheart, followed by her complete demolition of his arguments. The lesson was crystal clear. Respect isn't automatically earned through seniority or position. It's earned through competence, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when facing someone who thinks their status makes them untouchable. Because if the story proves anything, it's that in today's America, competence and preparation will always triumph over condescension and institutional arrogance, especially when a whole country is watching.